Welcome to the Talent Equation Podcast. If you are passionate about helping young people to unleash their potential and want to find ways to do that better, then you've come to the right place. The Talent Equation Podcast seeks to answer the important questions facing parents, coaches, and talent developers as they try to help young people become the best they can be. This is a series of unscripted, unpolished conversations between people at the razor's edge of the talent community who are prepared to share their knowledge, experiences, and challenges in an effort to help others get better faster. Listen, reflect, and don't forget to join the discussion at thetalentequation.co.uk. Enjoy the show.
Well, I am delighted to be joined this week's podcast. As you can probably tell, I'm once again in the car, travelling back from deepest, darkest southwest England through the rain. But I've got a guest that I'm in total awe of, not least of which because he was one of a pair of intrepid individuals who decided to engage with me to put on a development event up in Edinburgh for a load of coaches, and we just got back from Edinburgh, and we had 130 people up there all coming together to learn from each other. So it was a fabulous experience, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But Gregor Wood, welcome to the Talent Equation.
Thank you. Nice to be on, having been on the listening end for a while now. Hopefully I'll have something interesting for people to listen to myself, but that's to be seen.
Well, I imagine knowing what I know about you and the work you do and how committed you are to your own learning and your own development, and I can attest to that from the fact that you were prepared to put in all the hard work of organising an event for 130 other people, so that the staff at your school and yourselves could benefit from listening to some people who've been on the podcast to talk about what they do. So I'm certain that what you have to share will be of value to everybody. I guess the starting point is tell us your story. What's the journey you've been on within this whole world of sort of learning and development, coaching and talent development?
Well, I played a bit of rugby growing up, nothing too major, in the Scottish Premiership when I was a wee bit younger. Dropped out of rugby. Long story short, was falling out of love with it as a player. Now I've reflected on that, wondering whether it was the environment I was in, the place I was in as a person at that time. Not that anything dark was going on, but just that maybe rugby wasn't for me. Having played it for 19 odd years, I was at a point where I was starting to resent it a bit. So I decided to take a step back from playing, did a bit of coaching at a local club, which I was fortunate to get the opportunity to do so, whilst also studying as a PE teacher, which that's my profession in Edinburgh. And we were exposed to your podcast, among other things, by Andrew Brogden, who's in our department. Started listening, and then the poor kids at the school have been an experiment ever since to things we listen to and expose ourselves to. And that's in a nutshell the really quick journey of it. The conference journey all started with an opportune conversation that we had down in Wellington that grew arms and legs really quickly, but I'm thankful it did, because it ended up, the product of which was what happened Friday past, which I think, as you alluded to, 130 people went away with something they can take and apply, and maybe some new contacts, new friends. So yeah, that's I'm a learning coach. I think my practice changes in probably 6 weekly cycles. I learn something new, I hear something new. It would seem like I'm organised maybe to those that were involved with the conference, but that's not me. My mind's all over the place. Love experimenting, jumping on, trying things. So yeah, I'd say the environment that I am finding myself operating in is one that is very suited to my personality. That I like to take things. My coaching is a bit of a melting pot. I'm a bit of a thief, and just try and apply what I can to my practice. And as I say, I teach 11-year-olds, even younger, to adults. So I get the full spectrum to apply it, which is really fortunate.
And so in terms of just going back to what you were saying and the sort of journey you went on, and the environment you were in, and sort of falling out of love with the sport, kind of what was that all about? What happened there that sort of, I guess that was what brought you into coaching pretty much, was kind of coming to a stage with the game itself as a player and reaching a point with it, and then deciding that actually maybe what you wanted to do was to begin to help others have perhaps a better experience. What was it that kind of shaped that journey?
Yeah, well, growing up, I was kind of a wee bit of a bounce story growing up. That we had an ex-British Lion as our mini rugby coach, and the area that I was from we had a mini rugby group, the Royal High Minis, which we had a group of players that a number went on to national caps. We went on to the age grade national stuff, and I don't know if that was the start environment. It was people's dads, among others, even from the school that I work at just now. The Jim Calder was one of our coaches. He and Finlay, international rugby players. Duncan was in my age group. So we had a good rugby environment growing up. I then had a whole bunch of good coaches. Reflecting on it, they all had their different positives and negatives, but I had very autocratic coaches. I had a coach that was so player-centered, that was just a wonderful guy to be about, made you feel welcome, made you feel wanted. So I think it was more to do with probably inward looking with me, and at that stage I think playing my best rugby, maybe the culture, the club I was at wasn't quite where I would have liked it to be, but I was just getting to a point where I didn't want to hate it anymore, and nothing to do with the coaches, I don't think. I just thought, well, I'll go for a new challenge. I still love my rugby, maybe just not playing, and there's times my head tells me, oh, you can still go and do that, but my body's like, no, you're having a laugh here. So coaching is probably the best outlet for being on a rugby pitch, or being on the edge of a rugby pitch or a sports field or whatnot.
And then in terms of like your coaching journey, you managed to combine coaching with study at the same time. So you were doing your PE stuff as well as doing your coaching stuff. And I imagine so many coaches are PE teachers or at least teachers, educators. I imagine that was quite a nice synergy.
Yeah, absolutely. I went the one of an alternative route to teaching. Rather than doing the 4-year degree, I did a sport and exercise science with psychology degree, and then got to the end of the degree, and I was like, right, what do I do now? Somebody said, oh, there's a year's teaching course, what do you think? And then after that, just jumped right in and did the postgrads. I was fortunate enough to be at a school that was pretty rough and ready in my first year, so I got a real good grasp of kids that if they're not enjoying something, will tell you about it pretty quickly. So having to adapt things on the fly and whatnot. And then with my rugby background, that's probably what led me to the schools I've been at, more to do with adding to the games program as well as the PE program. But yeah, I think the playing and working, as many people find, especially with rugby, if you're not professional, it's quite a tough balance. I'll be with most sports, I'm sure, but one's got to give, and I was never going to go pro at rugby. So the teaching took the lead seat, and I've loved it, and I do love it. And as Danny Newcomb described this place, this is Disneyland that I'm teaching at just now. It's the best place to be. So I'm really fortunate to have ended up where I am just after 9-10 years of teaching.
And I mean, I can attest to that, because having hosted the event, and you've got this fabulous old building, you walk into it and there's this beautiful modern performance space with a mezzanine. It's a fabulous place to be learning in. And then you literally walk out the doors and you're straight onto 2 7-a-side hockey Astros, which I'm pretty glad I didn't go to school there, because I would not have got my GCSEs.
I was similar. I did a year of architecture and then found the environment that just, it wasn't, and that again was definitely the person leading the course didn't seem to understand people, and that put me off of that, and that took me down the sport route. As well as the 40 plus 60 plus hours I was doing as an architecture student in my first year. I was like, this is pretty hard. So sport's a wee bit easier.
Maybe that's why you've chosen to work in a place with such fantastic architecture.
Maybe I'm just drawn to that. But no, we're really fortunate with where we are. Just going back to your point about you not being able to complete your GCSEs, there's a good policing system for the boys, and the head of the school is pretty good at hauling them off the lawns when they need to be in their classes. So that's how they manage it.
Awesome. Awesome. So what I was going to go on to say was, before I went Robocop, was kind of just talking a little bit about what you're doing at the school now, and I guess the journey you've been on with your coaching and what you're trying to do and the philosophy you're trying to bring in and all those sorts of elements. Because you've got a pretty good learning community of coaches. I mean, a number of, when I was up in Edinburgh previously, you got a group of guys together. I think it was even in the holidays, just to sort of have a coffee and have a chat about the stuff you're trying to do. So just talk me through your environment and your methods and stuff like that.
Well, we're very lucky. I think it's Daniel Coyle. He outlines in his book the sort of key space for learning, and our PE department's pretty much a postage stamp, and there's 8 of us located in it. So we've got lots of opportunity to bounce things off each other. Those with a pretty diverse background in our department and open-minded, which is really good for the conversations that we've had. With our practice here, we've started to use our department meetings to effectively bring something to the table as a group. So you'll have your week where you bring a topic, and sometimes it would be a podcast, it might be an article. The one that kicked it off was actually the silent coach. That's what really started our journey of discussing and doing that. And we will discuss these things. We'll then try and implement them where we can. It's not always perfect. Sometimes it feels a wee bit like a broken record with what we're trying to do, but ultimately we are striving to make an environment where our pupils love sport, love being challenged, love challenging one another, are comfortable, are happy, and just, sport's a vessel for so much more than learning sport. The environment that we are lucky enough to have the pupils in, we get them in a completely different space where their interactions are different. You're still a teacher, but you're a different human being to them. If I'm in a shirt and tie, it's because something's gone wrong in my family, or I've got an interview. That's pretty much it. We're in our civvies all day. So we're doing our best to be as progressive as we can. As you said, the goal of the conference was to maybe get more people where we are just aware of what is out there. When Mark Burgess and I, who put on the conference together, when we were down at Wellington, we came across Sean Cummings and about biobanding and relative age effects and all that kind of stuff. And we were like, well, if people knew about this, and I know Sean wasn't with us this time, but if people knew or were more aware about this, then mixing teams would be easier, because an under-9 game, we're not going to get front headlines of that on a paper. So why not make the experience as good as possible? So that was kind of the goal of bringing people up to bringing the speakers up to where we are for more to hear it. One of our department is, again, just big on the growth mindset, and had that as one of the school development plans. So we're trying to get our kids just to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And that's a consistent message. The kind of things that underpin my coaching is effort trumps everything, or we'll not be outworked. If we are doing something, we're doing it to the best of our abilities. We're present, we're there, we're switched on. Kind of ties into Mark Bennett stuff, kind of ties into Daniel Abraham stuff. Just the people that I've been listening to, reading about, really just influenced me. And maybe I'm some sort of apostle for them, I don't know. But no, I'm in a really good place in my coaching, and I'm hoping that the boys and girls that I teach are having a good experience as a result of it. And hopefully that was seen with the boys that we had turning out. I was immensely proud of the boys we had turning out last Friday, because you see the quality of them, how receptive they are, how willing they are to be out of their comfort zone, discussing with each other. And that's really what we're going for. We don't want to make the best 16-year-old, 18-year-old, 11-year-old. We want somebody that plays hockey, rugby, tennis at their local club until they can't pick up the racket anymore, or can't pick up the stick anymore. Just that loves it is your third 15 captain, or the top bloke at the club that's watching the team every week. That's kind of the goal. And winning's great fun. I love winning. I hate for my team to lose, but the boys are very aware that it's not everything. There's so much more to gain from sport.
So, I mean, and I suppose the philosophy there is that if you pour enough love into this group of young people, and provide them with the best experience possible, not only will you foster and nurture a lifelong love of participation, but also some of those will be given then a springboard to take it further, take it to the next step on their talent development journey. And so by emphasising the experience and the connections, you're kind of almost getting the double whammy, I suppose.
Yeah, well, we're hoping that it's that kind of thing, that if the boys love what they're doing, they do it more. And then, that was me nudging the table. Sorry. If experiences, if we know about experience what we do, then the more you play something, the more you do it, the more you love it, the better you get at it. So we have boys opting into voluntary skill sessions, S&C sessions. Nothing's compulsory. We have boys playing age grade hockey, rugby. They're representing the country nationally, and we are consistently trying to just, as you say, provide an environment that the players feel that they are loved and cared for. Participation is up there with a goal as much as performance, but they don't have to be two distinct things. And maybe I'm sure you've gone around in circles with this on your podcast, but it's definitely trying to open more eyes to be, you don't have to be a hippie and everybody gets a certificate at the end. You can still create an environment where somebody feels welcome and loved, and they go on to meet their aspirations of being an internationalist or a first team player or whatever it is.
That was a reflection I had, just to sort of talk about the event a little. That was a reflection I had. I don't know what your take. I'm going to ask you to sort of share some of your takeaways. But one of the ones I had was Sarah Kelleher, who's been on the podcast before, and I had the pleasure of working with alongside, and learning a lot from. Who's with the girls under 18s, the England girls under 18s, and she talked about the kind of environment that she creates, or not creates, but actually co-creates, I suppose, with the girls, and the experience that she's providing for those girls. And it feels to me one of the things that she looks to try and do is to genuinely, devise with them a kind of an environment, a culture, if you like, that they know that they can thrive within. In her point about flourishing, she talks a lot about flourishing. But I sensed in some of the questions that were posed that there were some people who weren't 100% certain that was compatible with the performance environment. I definitely picked up a vibe. I don't know if you picked that up as well, or what reflections you had about that particular session that she ran.
I loved the session, if I'm honest. It was, I can't really have favourites, but Sarah was my favourite. No, I've listened to it back, and the conversations that were going on as a result, as you say, people in their head being like, oh, you can't have a performance environment, and the opposite side of the table says 100% this is a performance environment because the players have ownership and are leading it, and it means something to them, and therefore their input into it is so much greater and impactful. There's the discussions about gender. Oh, you can do this with boys, and she was like, well, I wouldn't do this with boys because boys might not want to do that. One group of boys may wish to have an environment where we're making videos and we're rapping and whatnot, but the other group of boys might say, listen, this is how we're going to flourish. And again, that was the big takeaway from the day: is be a thief, take what works, apply it, tinker, do what you have to do to make it work in your environment. And we are doing our best. We're on a touring year with both, actually we've got cricket boys away on tour just now, we've got rugby and hockey tours in the summer, and that'll be a time for us to say, listen, you've got a 2-year, some of you got a year left at school in your teams, some of you got 2 years. What do you want to come from it? What do you want your rugby hockey to be like? What is, to reference Mark, what are we like at our best, or when we're exceptional? What's going to be unacceptable for us? And we have all this time to then go and apply the things that she's talking about and Mark was talking about. So I really enjoyed her session. It was great.
What I liked about, actually, if you talk about those two experiences, talk about the way Mark approaches it, the way Sarah approaches it, is you're essentially getting two different approaches towards achieving the same goal.
Yeah.
Because what she's doing is, again, she's got full ownership, which Mark goes through as well. The players themselves are establishing the way they're going to behave, the way they're going to operate, what they value, how they're going to commit, all those sorts of things. And she's doing it in a slightly different way by utilising. She uses, for example, a lot of games. So she uses Lego, and she uses, different exercises and all those sorts of things. Mark's probably just taking a slightly more direct approach. That probably speaks to his military background. And different approaches are going to apply in different ways, and yet they've got exactly the same philosophical underpinning around a kind of a player-centered, athlete-led, owned environment where they can genuinely thrive.
No, I 100% agree. And what was really lovely about the day was Mark joining in with Sarah's session. and sharing the story, the story that had influenced his coaching. As Sarah alluded to in her session, the stories can be so meaningful, and if you attach a story to something, then, as you know, if you're coaching it, and a lot of work by others, if the story is attached, it's more memorable and whatnot. And people sharing their stories, Mark sticks his hand up and says, "Yeah, I've got a story for you." He referenced it as a tearjerker, and then the main thing that had influenced his coaching, found out, was the background with his dad and something his dad had said to him. So again, as you say, two very different not very different practitioners, but two on face value very different practitioners, both buying into what each other are doing and saying, and can completely relate. Just maybe referencing in a slightly different way to one another.
It was. I'd nearly forgot about that, actually. Yeah. What was fascinating to me was you had this, kind of double hard, ex-Royal Marine Commando, on the edge of tears, reflecting on his journey.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what brought him and what drives him to help others provide better experiences.
And even moments like that, sorry to interrupt, Stuart, even moments like that, a coach sitting at the table and reflecting, well, what's influenced you and what's got you where you were? We had a chap, an excellent hockey coach from another school, being like, well, here's my influencer, and I don't know if this makes me a good or a bad coach. So even just thinking about these things and reflecting on them with Sarah's session, that was a massive takeaway. And I'm sure for a lot of people will have gone back and have a think, well, here's why I coach, here's how it might come across to my players, what do my players want, all these questions. And again, the goal is to make people better practitioners, so the kids can get better experiences throughout their sport.
And then so just flicking around, because I mean, what I'm going to hope to do, some people might not have seen the event, been able to get hold of it. I will hope to sort of be able to put some of the videos, or at least clips of the videos, either up on my website or somewhere where people will be able to access some of the stuff. But one of the things I was really interested in was some of your takeaways about, you just sort of talking earlier about how you were watching back some of the sessions, and what were your kind of key takeaways? What were the things that you're going to take away yourself and start to try and apply?
Well, the day, for anybody thinking of setting up a conference, don't plan to take anything in on the day, because it's a whirlwind. It's a good fun whirlwind, but it's an absolute whirlwind. So get yourself a videographer like we did with the Coach Logic guys on board, because it's vital. And even for those that were there, I've heard some people watching back, they've sent me messages saying, 32 minutes into this talk or whatnot, or that practical session, did you hear that? It's great. Really, my takeaways, I really enjoyed Danny's session, putting all the theories and the really the academic stuff that he's into bro science that us PE teachers can understand. Really, he paints a picture and you're like, oh, that was so obvious. I have no idea why I didn't think about that before. And I don't know if I'll get the gold-plated version, but I'll definitely be picking up his book to have a mull over, because the stuff there, it's just the framework that he goes through and he's gone through. That was one of the talks at Wellington where Mark and I were like, this guy's next level. That's just a great starter point for PE teachers, for teachers, for coaches. The environmental design, the constraints. I was at the gym earlier and I was like, just being tired is a constraint. There's so much you take for granted, that we have kids doing things under fatigue, and that itself is something that they're experiencing that's game-like or whatnot. When I first went back from Wellington in his session, I pretty much constrained everything. I had kids in green bibs, yellow bibs, hopping. I didn't know what to do. And then as time goes on, you refine it and whatnot. And his work's really impactful. Anybody that's yet to have a look at the work or listen to him should definitely do so. Saying to you earlier that the Magic Academy guys, they just dove straight in. They just did what they do and went and coached. And they were working with my under 16 boys that I work with at school, and who are hopefully quite receptive to the kind of stuff they do. But during the session, you just see them, they're on it all the time. They are questions, they question one another, both Fletcher and Rusty firing questions across the place. Why did I turn that over to the boys? Picking up on they won't reference it as the excellent stuff, but picking up on the things done really well, asking questions, getting the boys in, getting bits back from them. And I think watching it back, the coaches that haven't yet done so, or the people that haven't yet done so from the session, definitely need to, because it's gem after gem. And they took on 60 minutes of practical. They just went for it. which again we're afforded some nice weather this morning. We had sleet, a bit more typical Edinburgh. But no, there's so many takeaways. I couldn't hit the nail on the head with one. That was a major thing for me. Just I'll watch it back 2, 3, 4 times still, make different notes on it, pick up something different. Yeah, that's a long-winded answer to say it was just all class. But
I mean, one of mine, there's a lot, but one of mine that I just wanted to sort of explore with you was in the session with Russell Earnshaw, Rusty, and John Fletcher, both of them I had the pleasure of, they've been on the podcast as well, but obviously had the pleasure of working alongside when I was working for England Rugby. And their approach is just a really interesting and fascinating approach, full stop. But one of the things they've done is they've obviously got their coaching cards, their sort of coach development cards, helping coaches, improve. And the kids had picked out a couple for Fletch. So Fletch had his work-ons, but then what they then did was, they threw the clickers out to the coaches. Firstly, all the coaches started off with a game of rock, paper, scissors. But what I loved about that was you get 2 points if you win with paper, which is basically why I lost, because I kept going for that. So I'm rubbish at it. But then that created 2 teams, and then we separated them out, and then off we went. But then they were throwing the clickers out there, and they said to the coaches, right, measure whatever you like. I just remember Fletcher just, measure whatever you like, just whatever you want to measure. So I just decided to go and measure the number of questions they posed. I was trying to follow Fletch around, and he walks through the game because they're co-coaching. You've got Rusty there with about 3 different types of balls, throwing them around and doing all these different things. And then you've got Fletch sort of mooching about through the and I'm trying to listen to what he's saying, and I'm clicking away as he's asking questions. And of course, because he lives and breathes in the world of rugby, he knows exactly where to be and where the ball's going to be and how he can avoid stuff. Whereas I'm constantly getting in the way of everybody because I don't know where to be at the right time, like getting barged over by some of your very, very polite young men. Anyway, I literally only clicked. I lost count after a while, but I clicked about 20 questions in the first 5 minutes, and he only asked, I think, maybe 3-4 questions that were related to the game, to the rugby. All the other questions were about connection, about him creating a connection with a player that he's never met before. He's walking up to, what's your favourite football team? And the kid says to me, one of your lads says, I don't like football. Oh, all right then, what about your rugby team? Who do you follow? And he said whatever he said. Who's your favourite player? Hamish Watson. Oh yeah, why do you like him? Oh, because he's does this, that, and the other. Are you going to play like him? So in the blink of an eye, he's creating a connection with a player, and then he might say to them right at the end, he'd say something along the lines of, "And so, what is it about Hamish that you want to develop in your game? I want to develop this." He says, "All right, then I'll say I'll give you a little challenge. How about if every time you do whatever the action was, I'll give you a bonus point?" He's like, "All right, I'll go do that," and off they went. And it happened in the blink of an eye, maybe in a very small stoppage in play. And it would have been very easy to miss that. It would have been very easy not to see what was happening there. And the way in which he did it as well, just very casual, very easygoing. And just, like I said, just creating that little moment of connection, but then also leaving that individual with a little area of focus. Just a little extra challenge. Just really fascinating to watch.
Absolutely, and they brought the front row club in, if you recall, at the start of the Q&A session. So we had 4 or 5 front row players, and then looked towards the first 15 coach and said, "So, what position do you play, hooker? Okay, how often have you kicked the ball? Once. Why did you not kick? It doesn't go very well. Did you kick the ball today? Yeah. How many times? 4. What happened? I scored 2 tries." And you could see the first 15 coach just being like, "Right, okay, I get it." And then Hamish addressing the floor. Hamish is the top bloke. If you cut him, he would bleed red, black, and gold, our school colours. And he just owned the floor. And I think Rusty was just going to pick him up and put him in his pocket and take him away because he's just some man. But again, this is going back to the environment. I mean, we've got boys that, I don't know if it's by luck or by design, they're just receptive to this, and we're not. I'm definitely not on the same level as Rusty and Fletch about creating the connections, but our boys, hopefully, you got that feeling from them that they're on it and they're into it. and they feel comfortable. No, that was great for them. It was a Magic Academy guy's idea to bring them inside and get them asked questions. So good on them for that as well.
Yeah, and I thought they represented you as their coach and the school extremely well. Like you say, Hamish in particular. I think they said Rusty and Fletcher said they were going to kidnap him because they were like,
I put it in a nicer way than kidnap, but yeah.
But you're just on that point, actually. I mean, I think you might be doing yourself a disservice. I mean, it's clear that that's a group of individuals who are very kind of used to being in an environment where they have opportunities to express themselves. They are asked to make decisions. That is clearly an expectation. They're asked to communicate what they're experiencing, and they are ready to do so. I mean, that feels to me like that. I mean, whilst they probably had never had that experience, it is a unique experience being on the receiving end of the whirlwind that is Russell Earnshaw. I mean, it definitely said to me that this was not a completely brand new thing for them. They were, it wasn't that they were thriving in the chaos, shall we say? So, I mean, there must be something in that. It can't just be pure chance. You've obviously been doing some of that work with them.
No, we have, and as I say, I've been a bit of a tinker man with them. I remember I've had them for 3 years now, and I remember shouting, "No, don't kick!" when one of my forwards put his foot on the ball in a game, bounced up perfectly, caught it and scored, and I was like, just shut your mouth. You don't know what you're doing. Everything that I've immersed myself in, and I'm not fully into all the theories and whatnot, but if there's something I come across that I'm interested in, they are receptive to trying it, or at least they're polite enough to to go along with it at the time. We've tried to just make everything in our rugby. I'll just go from a rugby point of view just now, and it's the same at hockey, I'm sure, at the school, but make it feel as much as we can like the game, make it feel hectic, try and get the boys to problem solve on the fly, see what the game's asking of them, see if they can ask anything of the game. So, and I think certainly with the boys coming through at that age group, they're buying into it, and I think they're certainly more confident rugby players than I was as a youngster, going through maybe a different route of how the game was played or coached. But I can't say for certain that goes on at every school. We're a good school at our rugby, but as I say, I'm just trying to create an environment that our boys are like, I might drop the ball every time or every third time it's thrown to me, but I'm still going to give this a try. I get the process. I'm going to play rugby when I'm older. These kind of considerations, rather than being the best at the end of the day. An environment that the people like we had at the conference have hopefully been a part of the environment that we've created and the things that I've been doing. Nothing's brand new that I've come up with myself, I'm sure. It's just cherry picking the best bits from what I feel everybody else is doing and applying it to the needs of my players.
But I guess so. Your background around sports science and psychology leans you in a direction, I suppose, of wanting to focus on that kind of culture and environment that allows an individual to perform at their best. Is there a thread there?
Yeah, I think we obviously teaching PE as well. We've got a certificated course, and I certainly think the mental aspect of sport is the most engaging for me. I'm no expert in it. Again, there's some podcasts out there I like because it becomes very accessible for us meatheads to wrap our heads around the psychology. But that's certainly a part that people talk about marginal gains and whatnot. But there's so much to do with the mental side of things that I certainly, that's going to be a goal for me, I reckon, next season, going through to try and focus on more, because you being in the moment, playing every minute of the game, regardless of what game it is, understanding how you're feeling, how that's affecting you, what your teammates might be feeling, registering where you are in the space, it's massive. And I think that will be the next experiment that I try and take the boys that I'm working with and girls that I'm working with in the PE classes through. And we, as you know, there's a huge emphasis on technical, tactical, how physically fit are we, but how mentally fit are we would be the question that we can ask. And I think a lot of the boys I work with are there, and I think they have been exposed to it in bits, but they maybe don't understand why yet. And that'll be the real challenge of me being able to put things across in a way that they can own and they can reference, and they can say, I get why we're doing this, I get how I'm feeling, or whatever the content is. And then hopefully they'll be better sportsmen, they'll be more aware of themselves in whatever facet life takes them. It could be with their families in the future, with their brothers and sisters now, whatever it is.
That's one of the things I really like about the ecological approach, the constraints-led approach, if you like, because you're always working around that triangle of task, performer, environment. You're able to expose young people to experiences, if you can design them well enough, that allow them to explore or discover their abilities in a range of different ways. And one of the things, for example, that you can do is create an environment whereby, for example, an individual learns to overcome difficulty. And you can design difficulty, deliberate designer, you can call it designer difficulty if you like, or deliberate difficulty, so that the players begin and then support them through overcoming the difficulty and see how they go about overcoming the difficulty and see who thrives and who struggles, and who thrives, who survives, who struggles. And on the basis then that what they're doing is developing, approaches to dealing with something that's an adverse experience. And they're able to then draw upon that when it comes to actually performing, at the best they can be. So it's one of the things I like about it is you don't have to talk overtly about, handling pressure or dealing with difficulty or growth mindsets or anything like that. You just create some experiences and then ask those individuals to reflect on the approaches they took, or how they felt, or what went on when they were exploring those difficulties. And so I guess that's going to be an interesting experiment for you next year when you actually design some of those difficulties.
Well, absolutely, and it's just as we went back to the awareness thing, we reference how aware of you, of what the game's doing, the problems the game's, or the opportunities the game's giving to you, but the self-awareness, that'll be the next one for sure. And I'm lucky in the environment we get hands-on the boys quite a lot of the time. We get them a good couple hours a week, so, and in PE and passing and colliding in the corridors and all that kind of stuff. So I'll try and be relentless on it, and I'll feedback how I'm going.
One of the things that might be quite interesting will be to, we talk a lot in the kind of ecological space around the idea of affordances, the idea of players becoming perceptually attuned to kind of the information that's coming at them in order to be able to make decisions. But one of the things we don't often talk about is how we need to change the environment in order to test whether that attunement still stands up. So one of my takeaways was a diagram that Danny produced, which was a triangle, and there was three E words. So at the top of the triangle was explore. The bottom left corner of the triangle was exploit, and on the far right corner there was execute. Now for me, depending where your activity is going to be, so let's say you're in the exploratory world, well, you're not creating a whole load of pressure in that scenario. You're not necessarily giving them lots of kind of time limitations and big scoring systems and all those sorts of things, because in that environment you're just saying to a group of players, we want you to genuinely explore the possibilities and determine what information is flowing towards you that might help you with a course of action. But then if you move the cursor, so to speak, down towards the execute space, then obviously you're going to design something slightly differently. Then you're going to actually say to them, right, well, now we've got to get this right. So there's no margin for error. It's high pressure. It's high intensity. There's consequences for failure, blah, 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 blah. But then what you're still looking for is did we see that perceptual attunement still taking place? Are they still able to see the information and make the decisions? And it'll be interesting to test that out, because it'll be interesting to see what the effect pressure or time or fatigue has on that decision-making capability.
Yeah, well, I'm going to test you, Stuart. How do you record that?
How do I record it?
Yeah, so I've got my notepad at my side, being like, right, Stuart's got a gem here. I'm onto something. I get some work done for me here.
So I guess, I suppose that one of the challenges with this approach is a couple of things. One is we could use recall. So we could ask the players when they're performing, kind of to recall what it is that they are seeing, hearing, feeling, touching, that is helping them to make these decisions. And we can do that in the exploratory phase and in the execution phase. The weakness with recall is sometimes they may just tell you what they think you want to know. I suppose the other way we can do this as well is to test it. And this is one of the things I love about Mark's approach. He didn't talk about it much at the conference, but the idea of using covert tests. So what we did 2 weeks ago, we now are going to do again. So without telling them, you just do it and observe how much of where they got to has stayed with them. And you might just say to yourself, wow, these guys have nailed it. They've got it. Or you might turn around and go, what we worked on 2 or 3 weeks ago, it hasn't stayed with them. There's bits of this. And that's when you step in and say, remember us doing this a few weeks ago? What happened? What is it? What are we now looking at? What are we looking at? Why are we doing something slightly differently? And I don't think this is done very much in coaching. We tend to just move on and we sort of think, oh yeah, we've nailed that. Move on. We never ever test it under similar conditions. Sometimes we can use the games as well. Sometimes we can use matches as a means by which to. I think we're always looking at the score line. For me, matches are developmental opportunities where we test people's capabilities, test their learning opportunities, see what we've been working on, whether it's transferring into the pressure of the game or not. So I suppose that's the approach I would take to test whether what we've worked on is actually standing up under pressure by almost conducting experiments. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm thinking of a situation in my head. We played a lot of the game 2-touch or Fiji touch at the start of the year, where touched by a second defender and the ball's turned over in your rugby games. And then I was wondering why in our games we were trying to score from everywhere, why there was no rucks, the ball was all over the place. We looked like a mess. And I was like, oh my God, there's a distinct correlation between us playing 2-touch and trying to score from under our post when we are under the cosh with 6 defenders on 1 player and passing on problems. And that makes complete sense because it's happened in real life. And that was one of the things we reflected on and tried to move forward in our coaching. But yeah, that's definitely a good way.
And then the weird thing is, this wouldn't be done very often, because more often than not, when it comes to a competition, there's a requirement for us to try and play slightly differently using different tactics, because the needs of competition change the dynamics. But it takes a very brave coach who says, well, I'm thinking more developmentally than that. So actually, because we've been playing games or we've been doing in training activities like 2-touch or Fiji touch, and Fiji touch, am I right in thinking if you get touched by anybody, you just got to turn the ball over? Is that right? You've got to keep the ball alive without getting.
I've maybe blended a number of games, but the first touch is free, so a single defender can make a touch on me. I can continue moving, and a second defender gets a touch on me. That's a turnover. So effectively, it's to try and get the line breaks through, see what opportunities you got to take on a 1v1, and then look for the offload following that, or put your foot on the ball, or whatever it's going to be.
I see. Okay. So, but in all cases, it requires the individuals to be able to retain possession effectively. Yes. In order to
absolutely.
Maybe good support runs, etc., etc. So, okay. So, having played that game for quite some time, and that being a focus area, you then transfer that into the game. For me, it would be very interesting, wouldn't it, to go, right, we're going to test ourselves and evaluate our success in the game based on only that metric, not the performance, not the scoreline, that metric. How effective are we at maintaining possession, and essentially avoiding contact and getting the ball to somebody else in a environment that is different in the sense that there is actually contact and all those sorts of things going on? That would be a really interesting experiment, would it not?
Absolutely. And I think with we are governed a wee bit by results here, but ultimately as I say, I love winning as much as the next person, but I couldn't care less as long as we've got something that we've learned from the game. You don't learn much from 12-10 or 14-0 or whatever it is. You learn much from what's happened during the game. So no, that would be a definite thing to test. And it is the kind of conversations that I would hope more coaches are having with their players. They've gone in with a focus. It might be completely off kilter, but that's what the conversations are based around. That's what you're talking to the substitutes about. That's what they're feeding back onto the players when they get their interactions with them. Because we're in a position where we can teach these people in sport more than we probably give ourselves credit for, and they can apply it to different parts of their life. If they can self-reflect, if they can understand something that they've been working on and they can see it in real life, then it's massively valuable for them.
So when you're working with a group of players, let's say, is there a stage you would go on between? So if you were playing a game like Two Touch, for example, which is obviously a touch-based rugby game, there isn't any physical, there isn't a tackle component. But obviously, if you bring in the tackle component, the dynamics change, don't they? So would you develop a game that's kind of a stepping stone between the touch-based game to the then physical game before then taking it into that competitive arena?
Yeah, we interestingly, Mark Burgess put together a game for the more junior boys that was two touch, but the second touch is contact. So the first touch you go for free. So if you can identify a 1v1 opportunity, you've got a line break coming, and it took the boys a number of goes to start to picture that together. But again, they're really receptive young people. And then the second touch isn't a touch. In fact, it's a contact. And if a ruck is formed, it's a turnover of possession. So it is a wee stepping stone. And what was really interesting, you see the kids start to try and beat the game. You see the ones that are more amenable to putting in the hits, kind of floating behind the defensive line, waiting for that first touch so they can go and get their tackles in. They were starting to organise themselves into pairs. So I'll be the touch, you be the tackle. And that little activity, definitely a step on, and it added a layer. You're 100% right with that terminology. Added a layer to it that the boys then had to ask and answer a number of other questions.
And what was the intent in terms of when you were designing that practice, or when Mark was designing that practice? What did he have in mind in terms of how the players might react, or what was the kind of aspect of the game that you were trying to explore with the players by designing the game in that way?
So the players at that age are limited by the amount of space they've got on the pitch. So there's not huge amounts of area for them to be finding the opportunity to line break or to get an offload in, because it's very, very difficult for them. So the hope was that with the first touch being free, they will be able to work out that, well, if we get this touch against a single defender, then there's going to be space behind them or next to them that we can get this offload in. It was a physically demanding game, so that, again, the reason it was designed, they play on a bigger pitch next year. So yeah, I think it was a really well put together game. But yeah, it was really to identify space, try and get opportunities for 1v1s or 2v1s, and then for them to hopefully get some success in executing it and to take on their man and try and offload, try keeping the ball alive. There's no harm in doing it. There's no harm in doing it ever, but certainly at the age and stage they're at, there's the risk reward. I'd rather practicing these things now than waiting until they've seen Sonny Bill as a 19-year-old and be like, you can pass like that. So as a personal reflection there.
Something you've just said there that I think is actually really interesting is the other thing that one of the guys at what the Magic Academies do a lot, this idea of beat the game, where they essentially are nearly always trying to create a game within the game. So you've always got your kind of major objective, but there's always these mini objectives in there. And the layers, really fascinating to see the layers that they develop. So they've got major objective, which would be based in the main design form, and then they'd create other mini objectives within that. For example, so there might be a layer down, which is, so we're playing like the 2-touch game, like you say. Second touch is a turnover, and Rusty would be walking around, and the turnover would take place, and then the ball the ball they were playing with would disappear, and another ball would appear that was a different shape, and it would be on the other side of the field, and there'd be a reaction to that game. So they'd have to reconnect and rejoin on that. And then there'd be another task in there around communication between the players. So that's another game within the game. And then individuals would be given individual tasks. So, for example, they'd have an individual on either side who, if they got an intercept, would get a mega bonus for the team. And other bits and pieces. And by the end of it all, once they'd layered in all the other games, and they were asking them, could they work out who the guy who was intercepting was, and all these sorts of things. Once they'd layered it all in, I mean, it's a pretty intricate experience with a lot going on. But the way they brought it in was, one thing came in, so it went from quite simple to then quite complex. But the players were able to assimilate all the different ideas and rules and concepts, and then it was a very rich learning experience because there was so much going on.
Yeah, one of the games that I enjoy playing with the pupils and players is the secret rule, and I'm sure you've played it before, and you just see their heads, they're exploring everything, and there's nothing is unexplored. So throwing the ball forward, whistle goes, no. Kicking the ball, that's fine. Somebody taking it with offloading with one hand, whistle stays there. So they're trying to work out the game the whole time. And I found that is a very simple starter point. So for anybody thinking, well, even for Danny's constraint stuff or the Magic Academy stuff, if you want to get your players talking, put them in an environment where they're trying to figure something out, and collectively that's the only way they're going to do it. If I know the answer, I don't want to tell the other team. If I think I'm close to the answer, I want to tell my teammates and see if we can explore it. And I'd probably pinch that from the Magic Academy or somebody along the lines of that. But that's a wee gem of a go-to for getting these little games within the games, because you find the kids are fearless, the players are fearless, they'll try anything, and they're happy to be exposed to anything, or at least that's the environment we've hopefully got for them here. So that would be my go-to game that I play.
I mean, and it's great. I think it's great that they're fearless and they're trying and they're creative and they're not afraid to fail and they're going to do different things, and that's just, that's great to see, and you can definitely see that coming through with that group. I suppose then what the great thing is then as we start to dial up the pressure or dial up the time available or the focus or the intensity or whatever it might be, and they become more and more adept at being able to perform and execute at these different levels whilst they're going along, whilst they're playing in this game. What happens is they're still able then to maintain their creativity and their problem-solving capabilities, even though it's under quite severe and quite high levels of pressure. And now you've got somebody who really performs brilliantly, and they're having a whale of a time doing it. And that's where you get that performance coming in without having to sacrifice the enjoyment and the engagement levels. Yeah.
Absolutely, and as you've said before, having a consequence that means something to the player or the person. Like if you have games where if you throw an intercept pass, you intercept a pass, you get to choose somebody from the other team to join you. So we want people looking for intercepts, but we also know there's the risk reward with it, that if you get it wrong, there's a defender out of position, but you get it right and you're Finn Russell, you're just about winning the game for Scotland. So
I wondered how long it was going to take you to drop that one in.
Yeah, I missed the second half of it. My wife and I went out for dinner. I watched the first half and I was like, thank goodness. On our rugby WhatsApp feed, I was like, oh, this is a nightmare. It's going to be 400-0. And then I see BBC Sport coming through at the dinner table. I was like, my goodness, this is some game. And then typical Scottish fashion, did our best to throw it away. But no, some event, and that was hotly discussed at the conference as well. Why? I think it was actually Mark Bennett was saying, well, what changed in the second half? And the awareness of the players, right? Well, Scotland put far more pressure on England, and what did England do? Nothing. They didn't adapt. And these little messages hitting home, and that's pro level, and that's a very unfair maybe way to brand it as that's as simple as that. But there's lots of little messages that we've covered and we've discussed that go all the way through to pro, and they'll be down to teaching your 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds.
But interestingly, just talking about that game, and it was a game. Why did the question nobody was asking was, why did Scotland manage to go 33 points down in the first half or whatever it was? What happened? Why did they not turn up? And then what was different in the second half? Because you could argue that it's easy, isn't it? You're 33 points down, throw caution to the wind. Let's express ourselves and play. Why didn't they do that in the first half? Was it a message that they were told, oh, we're going to be more constrained than that? Or were they constraining themselves in what they're capable of doing? Because watching Scotland play throughout the entire Six Nations tournament, you saw moments of absolute magic and genius, right? They played some beautiful rugby. There was an execution problem in terms of they weren't always able to play that, and then that cost them in quite a few of the games. But if it was me watching that, I'm thinking, forget the scoreline. This is a group of individuals who can actually do some amazing things, and actually all we've got to do is just keep going with them, and eventually they're going to be able to execute. But the question I've got is, why? What is getting in the way of that performance taking place more often than it is not? Because they tore England to shreds in the second half. What's the difference? And that's an interesting and intriguing question, I think. I don't expect any answers, but
maybe as a Scotsman, it's we get ourselves into these positions of, oh, we've got something really special here, and then it's typically Scottish that we go and throw it away, hence going to Kazakhstan and playing some football on what should have been the best Euro qualifiers that we're going to have in a long time. That was touted by the press. But it could have been pressure for the boys. They, having won the Calcutta Cup at Murrayfield the year before, retaining it, knowing going to Twickenham to do so, no doubt they're more than up for the task. But that might have been on their shoulder. Listening to Stewart McAnally speaking at half time, all they wanted to do was win the second half. That's all they were referencing. Now there's little bits and gems from the senior players. Greg Laidlaw referenced the kick chase was off. They went to amend that and then put England under a bit more pressure. And as Stewart said, every minute that goes on, you're building confidence. You start to believe a bit more. And yeah, if somebody could bottle it and then sell it as coaching gold, they'd be a millionaire.
There are some because there were some interesting, I thought, nuggets coming out. Because apparently, from what I gather as well, again, you don't know any details, but apparently Finn Russell also said, look, you're asking us to kick the ball. Every time we do, they keep running back and scoring a try. Should we stop kicking it and should we start running it ourselves? Simple idea, isn't it? But yeah. Back yourself a little bit.
But again, I'm sure Gregor's creative environment where the player voice is massive from what he had done at Glasgow and with Scotland, that's not, these conversations wouldn't be ridiculous at half time. People actively trying to problem solve, and that's where we're getting into Scottish rugby now, but that's where we feel in a really good place, and we're happy that our boys are coming through a system that they're going to be, the top end is doing all the stuff that we're trying to do and very amenable to it. So that's really positive as far as we're concerned. But we a point more, and it's a different story. It's retaining the cup via winning and then instead of drawing, but we'll hang on to that.
That's one of the things I think that was interesting, and it just a segue into Mark's session, watching him working, because he was also working alongside your first 15 coach, was he not?
Yeah, Stewart was with him.
That's right. And what was really interesting was hearing him frame. I mean, he obviously focused in on the rule of three. So to do the framing with the players around their role and what they needed to do and what they didn't need to do and all those sorts of things. And then watching the intensity. And there was a different level of intensity between the session that Mark ran and the one that Danny ran. But that stood to reason, because it felt to me anyway that Danny was definitely much more in the kind of learning and probably closer towards an exploration space. So It was like there was less pressure, it was more low key, it was a bit more relaxed. Whereas Mark's session, probably by comparison, felt a bit like a boot camp. But that was because I think Mark wanted to present an alternative out there to the coaches, which was, if you've got a group of players and they're closer to the performance, they need to perform, we're going to train in a way that's going to be very intense, very focused, really, really hot on the communication, really focused on kind of error-free, quite high levels of pressure. And it was a very different environment. It would have felt very different to the participants, and it certainly felt different to the observing coaches, I would have thought.
Absolutely. But although interesting, I spoke to the hockey boys once to finish the session with Danny, and they're like, "Oh, we're knackered. We're absolutely done in here." But no, I think for the hockey boys as well, it wasn't as new for them. As I say, they've got a hockey coach that will be doing a lot of the stuff with them, maybe in a different way to Danny, but it wasn't brand new. Whereas Mark's demeanour with them was something they probably don't experience day to day. But you can see, as I referenced in one of the tweets, the coaches were all on the edge of their seats, intently listening. The boys, they had no choice but to engage, because he was happy just to call them out and say, "Listen, what are you thinking about that?" And that's the blends that a coach will find, that how will my players react to one way or another, am I questioning, whatnot. But no, different experiences, but I think the threads of it are really, really similar.
Yeah. So in terms of kind of moving forward in your next phase of development with the group that you're working with, but your kind of thing, I mean, what would be what can you see yourself exploring over the next year? So you talked about some of the psychological side, some of building that, but what are the other areas, particularly say in your own practice, that you want to develop, and what are the things that you're going to commit to in your own learning and development?
With my own practice, I think it's going to be just trying to continue to read and embrace as much as I can. I think the constraints-led approach is something that I'm quite drawn to. That as I say, I know it in a bro science version, but I don't know the ins and outs of it. And I think if I had a better awareness of it, then that would probably make the practices that I created more engaging. Maybe I'd get the outcomes closer to what I was after. As we've discussed before, in person, just if I create a game that demands something of the players, it's better than me doing a drill that would do the same thing in a different way. I think I'm quite good with my relationships with the pupils, but that's another thing that I can continue to do. That's again being influenced by a lot of things, but if we can role model as coaches the behaviours that we want to see, the boys understand that we're people, we understand that they're people, I understand there's stuff going on. I'd hate to be a teenager growing up just now. The world's too busy, it's too easy to get caught for stuff. So just I think the player-centred and constraints-led will be my two definite goals for this year, to continue building on it. As I say, my practice changes week to week. I see something shiny, I'm on it. I'll just be maybe trying to knuckle down those things. Question I had for you was the best conversation, sorry this is jumping off a wee bit, but the best conversation you had at the conference, because there's loads of conversations going on. I saw you interacted with lots of people. As I said to you earlier, we had a chap travel from Spain that was an absolute legend, Guillermo Lopez. He's hoping to do something there that I'm really hoping for a guest invite to. But your best conversation from the conference?
Wow. God. Well, I had a brilliant conversation with one of your colleagues, whose name escapes me. I feel bad, actually. Who heads up your junior girls program?
Yeah,
Pippa, that's right. And she was talking to me about some of the challenges that she faces around girls hockey in particular, and the challenges around some of the traditional structures that are embedded, like, for example, having, A, B, C, D teams and playing in a certain way and all these sorts of things, and some of those kind of environmental constraints and what she can do within that. And so I was exploring with her what her opportunities were, and sort of trying to maybe say, well, just because the constraints are, those environmental constraints exist, doesn't constrain you from operating within those constraints in a way that maintains your player centeredness. Because to her mind, it was like, well, we have these A teams, B teams, C teams, D teams, and as a result, we sort of select them, and then and I was sort of saying, well, do you have to train like that? Could you, if you wanted to, say, well, although we've got A, B, C, D, for a period in time during the season, what we're going to do is we're going to have a four-a-side festival where we've got one player from A, one player from B, one player from D, one player from C, and they make up a team, and they have a league that runs throughout the season, and they play periodically together in these mini festivals, and then they get points, and then they've got so they're getting a lot of cross ability work and connections across the teams rather than just the more able players. And the reason we were talking about doing that was recognizing that talent development is non-linear. So the players who at say 12 or 11 or 10 who are currently deemed to be A players within say 3 weeks or 4 weeks could go off the boil, and there's other players who are coming through who are going to take their place. And the problem you'd have is if they only ever train and play with players of a similar ability, then they're not necessarily always getting the sort of stretch that they need. So that was a suggestion we had around that. And then she was also talking a little bit about the idea of, how do you approach, say, selection, or how do you approach like competition and not have all the emphasis on the competition. And so Danny and I, again, were exploring with her around what the school values are. And she was able to articulate those. And I said, well, what about if you have, weekly awards, or you have, team-based awards based on the values as well as the scoreline? So not only are you saying, well, this player played well, but you're saying this player espoused one of our values. I can't remember what your values are, but you had about 8, don't you?
9, yeah, of
9.
course. And don't ask me to recite them. Integrity is my go-to.
So there you go. But integrity is a really good one, right? As an example, right? So you've got a group there who go, you say, right, actually, this player receives our integrity award for this week. Why? Because, for example, they owned up when they'd knocked a ball on and the team had scored a try. They owned up. They were being honest. They've got high levels of integrity, for example. Or they might show integrity in lots of other different ways as well. I think, so what I was saying is that we often have these values. So why don't we embed them into the culture of everything we do, both in training, and have a training prize as well as a match day prize? Why does everything have to be based on the performance day? Why can't we, during training, have integrity-based prizes? The other thing I took away from Sarah's talk, and we hadn't done Sarah's talk when we were having this conversation with Pippa, was how she uses things like, she'll have grit week, or she'll have a creativity week, or she'll have, energy week, whatever it is. So she's got these themes that emerge. Well, they could be based on the values. Again, it could be about, honesty, teamwork, dedication, commitment. And you could have that theme running through. So what would a really committed player look like? How would they behave? How would they act? What things would you see them doing? And then bring that into training, hopefully see that transfer into practice. That's a big takeaway from Mark Bennett's stuff, how he trains behaviours, not just the game stuff that's going on. Because that was something that was really interesting when I was observing, even talking to people like Danny, who was saying, I'm not seeing the team stuff, I'm not seeing the game stuff going on. That's not the focus. The focus was, can these players effectively communicate together? So the game's incidental. It's just a vehicle to enable players to show how well they can communicate. So that's a big takeaway, is how we can train behaviours, train values, train philosophies, and put emphasis on them into our training. And, the game's sort of just going on in the background. So that was a big theme I was sort of exploring with her.
Yeah, absolutely. And with Mark's, as I say, we're on a touring year, and that's going to be integral to what we do. We'll reference what is us as the best pupil from our school that we can be. And that will underpin everything we do. A really nice way that my colleague references is good people make good rugby players. So we're just going to try and keep that as our message throughout. That'll be the goal going forward for those boys.
And from the perspective of bringing that to life, let's take integrity as a value. I use, just thinking about that, like Mark's framework around UAEs, the unacceptables, acceptables, exceptionals. So, for example, just say, right, with the group, right, when we're training from the perspective of integrity, what would be unacceptable? Yeah. Kind of people getting advantage on each other, people cheating, all those sorts of things. Okay, so what would be an acceptable level? Or acceptable level would be that we're all playing by the rules, we're playing on the edge. What would an exceptional level of integrity be? An exceptional level of integrity would be, I'm committed so hard to playing this as exactly as we need to play it by, that if I see a transgression in the slightest, I'm going to call it on my teammates and my opponents. those kinds of things. Be really interesting just to sort of see how that could plan out and play that against the values to really bring it properly to life and get the players then start calling each other out. We're unacceptable here. Right? That was a knock on. You knew it was a knock on. You didn't call it or whatever.
Yeah, just go back to the values-based stuff. We'd have that as a conversation because within PE, that you don't win a PE lesson. Well, some kids think you do, but you don't win PE lessons. PE for us is about them loving it, experiencing the sport. So the values part, we're going to implement that into the department is a hope of ours to just reference values. So as you say, there's 9 of them within the school. If we've got a kid that is Mr. or Mrs. Grace this week or enthusiasm, then they are going to be celebrated for it. And I think that us doing it within the school, so thinking of a club context, if anybody's at a club, if you can get a grassroots up that this is what we do, then by the time they get to the top end of it, or the seem to be top end, the oldest group of it, then it should be second nature to them.
I love that one. That's one of your values is grace, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, imagine being, having grace. So, obviously if anybody does the whole bad winner thing and like try and rubs it in someone's faces when they've scored a try, unfortunately the points are rubbed off because you haven't shown grace.
Yeah, but again, it's Mark stuff. We need to be relentless and on it the whole time, and that's the challenge of anybody, any organisation. We're a pretty big machine here, and it's getting as many people on the same script and just role modelling what we need to do because it rubs off. And yeah, we're in such a fortunate position to be working with young people at a pivotal time. We see more of them than their parents, some of them. So.
Well, Gregor, look, it's been a fascinating conversation. As you can probably tell, I've parked up because I thought it was worthwhile having the conversation without me driving along. I can't thank you enough for you and Mark. I know how hard it was for you to put that event on, all the logistics in the back room and having to deal with me with intermittent communications because I'm chasing my tail all over the place. But I thought we put on a great day. I certainly had a great time putting it on. I thought we had a great space to do that. I thought there was a lot of great conversations going on from what I could gather, and certainly some of when we had the kind of sort of debrief session where we just allowed coaches to sort of come and ask us questions in an informal way. Certainly some of the dialogue I was getting from people was that they'd really had a lot to think about and they were going to be taking quite a lot away. So I can't thank you enough for the work you've done and your ongoing commitment to learning and development. And I'm going to publicly now get you to make a commitment to Talent Equation Live 2, The Revenge. Whether it happens next year or in a year beyond that, I don't know. But we might commit to doing a future event together.
Yeah, absolutely. We're open-minded. We've got the work-ons to take away from Friday, as you alluded to. We loved the event. We loved hosting. We loved facilitating it. There's bits we could do better, and me myself, it's not going to sit well with me that we didn't absolutely nail it. So there's going to be another one. I might take up Guillermo and have him host it in Spain, but we'll see how we go. Well, yeah, I think for people, just keep their eyes peeled. We'll see what we can do.
Awesome stuff. Well, I appreciate you coming on. It's been great to putting up with my the intermittent 3G signal. All the best with the next phases, and obviously we'll be in touch, and people can keep their eyes peeled for an announcement in some time in the future.
Yeah, we'll sleep on
it. Nice one. All right. Cheers.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the Talent Equation podcast. If you like the show, then please consider supporting it by leaving a review on your favorite podcast player, telling your friends about it, or even becoming a hero and show your appreciation by becoming a patron. Just head over to thetalentequation.co.uk and click on the Becoming a Patron button at the top of the page.